Lyle Hopper was an average-looking man in the middle of his lifespan. He had salt-and-pepper hair and dreary eyes. He resided in a run-down shack in the woods away from the hustle and bustle of Odessa. But there was one thing he couldn't get away from: the bells atop the church. Lyle was not a fan of these bells. However, he couldn't bring himself to leave the town. The bells rang every day like clockwork, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. They were never late. They told the town when the day had begun and when it was over. Everyone lived by these bells. Lyle stood on the shabby porch of his run-down shack, tucked away in the woods, the sun making its descent into the mountains. It was a perfect day. For anyone else in Odessa, that is. For Lyle, it was just Tuesday. The shack behind him only had one large room, with a wall that jutted out and acted as a divider. On one side was a small kitchen. Despite being secluded from the rest of the town, his hidden abode had running water and a faint amount of electricity running through it. There was a small sink that sat next to a refrigerator, although it functioned more as an icebox. Wedged against the divider and icebox was a pantry filled with all sorts of odds and ends. A meter away from the sink stood a small wooden table, with a single chair tucked away underneath it. On the other side of the divide was Lyle's bedroom. A small spring bed sat atop a wire frame. Not the most comfortable setup, but it makes do. In the undivided side of the shack was a thick bookcase lined with all sorts of different reading materials. Next to it lay a small chest filled with objects of a past life that tickled the brain. Evening bells rung like they always did. Lyle grabbed his head in pain. Fear brought the poor man to his knees. The chimes brought nothing but trouble. Lyle found himself in front of the church. How did I get here? He asked himself. Last thing he remembered, he was on his porch reading an old dusty book. Yet here he was in front of a church. Lyle looked at the stained glass windows, and the Virgin Mary looked back. He extended his arm and grabbed the large ring on the front of the door and pulled. With a little extra muscle, it opened. The hall of the church was massive. A long carpet lay on the floor extending from the door to the other end of the room. Pews were evenly spaced on either side of the carpet. The walls of the hall reached into the darkness above. The light that seeped in from the outside through the stained glass windows painted the floor. There was a single person dressed in a robe seated in one of the pews. The robed figure got up and approached Lyle. A silver cross that hung from his neck swung back and forth with each step. "What is it that troubles you, my child?" the figure questioned. What troubles me?" asked Lyle. "We don't normally receive visitors after the day is ended, not unless something is the matter. There's no problem. Please, don't be shy. You can tell me of all your worries." The robed being put his arm around Lyle, only to have him duck away. Lyle lashed out, "Don't touch me!" The figure retracted his arm and lifted his hands. "All right, I won't touch you, but please, have a seat." He moved his hand with an open palm to point at one of the pews. Lyle nodded and slowly sat down in the pew. The man took a seat a person's distance away from Lyle. "So, what is it that bothers you?" the man asked again. Lyle didn't always live in a secluded shack in the woods. He was once part of a perfectly normal household. His mother and father loved him very much. However, as times got rough, Lyle's father had slowly started to lose himself. When the bells rang alerting the town of the closing day, Lyle cowered in fear. The bells were not there as a friendly reminder, but as a warning of the coming storm. No sense of relief washed over him, but instead fear was instilled whenever the golden chimes rang. His father would soon be home. Rage in his eyes and alcohol in his breath, a myriad of fists and verbal assaults would burst from the intimidating figure that towered over him. After the beast had exhausted his energy, he would retreat to the couch where he would slumber till the next morning. The only way to tell whether he was alive or not was the rising and falling of his chest as he breathed. After the storm had passed, Lyle retreated to the corner of his room and let out a pitiful cry.